Hey, it's Alante here, and we're on the last session of the Grad School Success Summit. It is, as you would always say, last but not least, really one of my truly favorite academic content creators. We have Dr. Autumn Griffin here. I'm going to have her introduce herself, but today we're talking all about wellness. This session's about wellness. We've been talking about our mind, and we're going to talk about our body now. And so, Dr. Griffin, I'm going to just turn it right on over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm going to try to share my screen. Yep, there we go. Look at that. Look at me doing things with technology. Okay. So first of all, I want to welcome you all to the final session, and I want to thank Alante for allowing me to be a part of this summit for so many years and for organizing just for all of this and just being such a wonderful soul. So yeah, like Alante said, my name is Autumn Griffin, and my session today is called One Breath at a Time, using yoga to cultivate calm during grad school. I'm currently in yoga teacher training, 200-hour yoga teacher training, and I will have graduated that in July, I think. Who knows? We'll find out together. Okay, so again, my name is Autumn Griffin. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I completed my doc program at the University of Maryland, College Park in the Teaching and Learning Policy and Leadership program. Next year, or starting in July actually, I will be starting a postdoctoral research fellowship at the University of Pennsylvania. I also like to talk about a bit about who I am outside of my scholarship and academia, because we are whole people. And so I am a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I am a storyteller. I love good, hearty belly laughs. And I also really love yoga. So I want to start by first just explaining what yoga is. And Dana Smith is actually my yoga guru. She's who's teaching my training. And the word yoga is derived from the Sanskrit word yuj, which means to unite or integrate. And so what yoga helps us to do is to create the balance between our mind, body, and spirit so that all of them are one and aligned. And I think that's particularly important as we move through graduate school. A lot of times we're focused so much on our on our mind and what we're learning and how we're processing information that we forget about these other parts of our being, of our humanity. So I want to start by telling you where my yoga journey began. This picture was taken, I believe, in 2016 when I graduated from my master's program and we went on vacation. And I don't think it hit me that I was a yogi until this moment. This was a candid picture a friend of mine took, but I have actually been practicing yoga since 2008. So I graduated high school, college, and my roommate, her name was Sarah, she invited me to a yoga class at like the campus recreation facility. And I was like, girl, I'm not going to that. Yoga is for white people. And she laughed at me and just kind of like walked out of the room, went and did her thing. And when she came back, she was typically someone who's like very bubbly and all over the place. And she was very calm and centered, and there was a different energy about her. And so I continued to watch her go and come back and notice how her energy was different every time. So finally one day I broke down, like probably around the middle of the semester, midterms, and was like, cool, I'll go with you. And I went and I found a quiet corner in the front of the room where no one could see me in this room full of white faces, me and my roommate. And I practiced and I felt very conscious of my body. But I will say that when I allowed myself to surrender to the practice at the end, I felt very different. I felt a calm. I felt prepared to return to my room and continue doing my work. And so yoga actually sustained me through undergrad. I took some yoga classes as my gym credits. When I became a new teacher, it sustained me and brought a sense of calm around something that can be a very jarring time for a new teacher and also a young adult. And then again through graduate school in my master's program. And so I started to realize that this was something that I turned to regularly when I felt stress rising up in my body or in my surroundings. And I think as I began to go deeper into my scholarship, I began to realize that this is not just a practice that is something that takes place on the mat, but also off. One of the frameworks that I use in a lot of my work is Black feminist theory. And so Angela Davis says that self-care has to be incorporated into all of our efforts, right? And I take that to mean that not only do we have to practice self-care when we are actively thinking about, exercising, working out, what have you, but even when we're thinking about how we're approaching our grad work, and I'll talk a little bit about this later. And then, of course, we have Audrey Lauren, who told us that caring for ourselves is not self-indulgence, it's preservation, self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. I think what's particularly important about this as Black and Brown folks in the academy, that this is not something we're taught to do in academia, right? We're taught, make sure you're prioritizing your work, make sure you're getting all of these things done. But if you are not well, you cannot do the work. Right. And so it is a politically radical choice to say, no, I'm going to center my mental, emotional, and physical well-being in order to carry out this work. I think another thing that's important to note is that yoga is not just a practice that exists on the mat. It's something that happens both on and off of the mat. So I want to run through a few different practices that are considered yogic practices and can sustain us through grad school. The first of which is journaling or reflection, right? I think a lot of times we think of this as like, wake up. So some people have talked about morning pages where you wake up in the morning, you write a certain number of pages before you get your day started. It's also, as researchers, something that we do in the research process. So for those of us that are doing qualitative work, if you're writing research or memos about the work that you're doing, that is a part of yoga, right? That's the journaling and the reflection that's taking place, this thoughtful work about this deep thought about something important and near to you. Meditating, which is simply deep thought about something for a while, right? So meditating doesn't have to happen on your pillow, on your mat, on the floor. It can happen when you're walking. I know that walking has been a place where I find a lot of solace these days. It can be while you are driving and you're deep in thought about a topic. It can be washing dishes, right? Sometimes it's this almost like hypnotic state where you're really focused on one particular thing. And so when you're washing dishes, your mind it can wander, right? But we have control of our minds, and you can really control or choose to meditate on a particular thing at that moment. It can happen before and after writing sessions. We have the poses or the asanas, and also the flows or vinyasas. So if you go to a yoga class, those are the things that you'll learn and practice. It's also feeling, acknowledging, and accepting, right? And so sometimes you wake up in the morning and you don't feel like writing. You don't feel like going to class. Sometimes we feel imposter syndrome, right? And rather than denying or pushing those thoughts and feelings down, it's saying, this is where I am right now in my current state, and I'm going to acknowledge that. It's also not judging that feeling, right? It's not to say that you don't work to work against the feeling, but when you feel imposter syndrome, what is the narrative you're telling yourself in your head? Is it, I can't do this, you're right, I need to leave? Or is it, I feel right now like I don't belong here, and I can acknowledge that. What are the things that I can do to change that, right? Yoga is also setting goals and working towards them intentionally. And so in grad school, there are lots of opportunities that come up, lots of opportunities to speak, to lecture, to go here, to do this, right? But how are you working intentionally towards the goal that you set? What is it that you wrote about in your personal statement? What is your why? What brought you to grad school? How are you working towards that goal? How are your yeses and your nos aligning with what it is you initially set out to do? And then it's celebrating when we make those goals, right? So whether it's submitting a paper on time that was really challenging, or passing comps, or passing your proposal, what is the thing you're doing to celebrate? Yoga is also service. Sometimes that happens in our scholarship, sometimes it happens elsewhere. It's diligent study of a topic which as grad students we are all participating in. It is breath, which we'll go through a breath exercise a little bit later today. It's practicing honesty and authenticity and speaking your truth, right? When we think about the different chakras or the energy centers in the body, our throat chakra is all about speaking truth and authentically speaking our truth and being honest about things. I think about bell hooks, right? Who even talks about this idea of talking back. That's yoga, right? And then also something that I have found really helpful for me is intuitive eating, right? It's figuring out what I can eat to support my body to do the work that I need to do. So there are some foods that make me really tired. And so if I know that I have a big paper to write, it means not eating that food before I start my work. I know sometimes one of the mental barriers to yoga can be thinking about some of the financial costs. It doesn't have to be something that's expensive, right? So I want to talk about building your practice on a grad school budget. And I wish this is something someone had told me before I started grad school. So the first thing is that there are volunteer apprenticeships at many studios. So what that means is that when the world opens back up, and I am praying and hoping that it opens up soon, but also that we get a vaccine soon so that we can go out into the world safely. When the world opens back up, a lot of yoga studios will have apprenticeships where you can volunteer maybe 1 or 2 hours a week, receive free yoga classes or a free membership to the studio. That transformed my practice, because as a doc student making $18,000 a year, I wasn't able to pay for yoga, right? But being able to volunteer 1 or 2 hours a week at a studio that I loved was really nice, because then I could just practice all I wanted. A lot of times studios will donate mats when they are ready to purchase new ones. So be on the lookout for when some of the studio equipment starts to change, and maybe ask around about, hey, I noticed you seem to be getting rid of some things. Would you be interested in donating your mat? There are tons of apps and websites. One of the first websites that I was introduced to by a homegirl was Do Yoga With Me. And you can choose different times, different levels, different body parts that you want to work on or focus on. There is an app called Down Dog. At the beginning of quarantine, they were offering the app for free for 90 days. I don't know if that's still the case, but it's definitely worth looking into. There are, of course, some YouTubers who are wonderful. I really love Jessamine Stanley and Ariana Elizabeth. They are 2 super dope Black women yogis who are really important. A lot of times in yoga classes, you'll see props, and props are great, but they can get really expensive. And so since I have been teaching yoga at home during this, have been using a lot of prop substitutions. So the first thing is, if you don't have a mat, get yourself a blanket, lay it flat on the ground and use that. If you do not have a yoga block, which I don't have in the room with me right now, get yourself a thick book. We're grad students, everybody has a thick book laying around somewhere. Use that book to help you support your practice. And then lastly, in terms of a strap, which helps with a lot of different stretches and pulling and helping us to further deepen the stretch, use a belt, right? Loop it, tie it around your foot, your arm, what have you, and use that to help support your practice. And then the last thing is living yoga off the mat, or living yoga, right? Which is a lot of what I talked about in the beginning of the session, where, you don't have to, and I'll go back to that slide. There are all of these different ways that you can live yoga all outside of the physical practice, right? Take up any of these, and these are also free and sustainable practices for you during grad school. A couple of Black yogis and yoga communities that I follow. The first is Dana Smith. I mentioned her in the beginning. She is my yoga guru. She's super dope. She centers Black folks in her work, in her yoga work, and also mothers, right? Which I think is something that's really important. She does a lot of maternity yoga, and thinking about women who are having babies and what does it look like to practice both while you're pregnant and when your child is born. Tamisha Ponder of Sankofa Yoga is also super dope. She is also a doc student. I want to say her work is on student activists during the Black Lives Matter campaign. So she is also another one who is centering Black folks in her yogic practices. And then there's Lori Henderson, who is a dear friend of mine, and former fellow coworker, who practices, is a registered yoga teacher, and also centers Black women in her yoga practices, right? And thinks about what it means. She said to me this morning when we were chatting that she has started to think of yoga as a Black feminist practice. And I think that's so powerful to think about all of the ways that Black women move through the world, the various oppressions that we face, and how yoga not only combats that, right, but how the praxis of yoga is a Black feminist thing, right? To acknowledge and to accept, to move from creativity rather than this objectivity, this that doesn't actually exist, that research tries to help us believe exists, to move from forgiveness rather than this rigid rubric that we've set for ourselves or that an institution has set for us, right? And so these are three really dope Black women yogis that if you are looking to start your practice or follow anyone, I would definitely recommend them. I do have a second part of this, but I know we want to open it up to some questions. So for the second half, I'll just tell you, I'm going to move through. It's not a full practice, but I do want to show some folks some poses or some asanas that are particularly helpful for grad students, especially as we're writing and thinking about where we might be holding stress in our body. And so I did want to give folks a few minutes to ask questions before we move on to that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Griffin. Also, I just want to pull everyone's attention to the bird chirping in the background and how calming and relaxing it is. Detail, okay? The first question is from Sequoia. She asks, have you heard of mindfulness meditation? Have you tried it? And if so, what do you think?
Mindfulness meditation, I have not. I think to some degree, all meditation is mindful, or should be mindful. And so that's not something I've heard of, but I'd be interested to learn more.
Okay. Lenine asks, what are some big misconceptions about yoga that minorities may hold?
Yeah, I think the first one is that Black folks don't do yoga, right? That was my first misconception when I was invited. And I think that's because, like in all things, there's not necessarily how do I want to say this? We have been silenced in the wellness fields for so long, right? And so I think that the first misconception is that Black folks don't do yoga. Yoga is a practice that was created in India. Like, it was people of color who created this practice. Like, how dare folks say, like, we don't belong in this space, right? So that's one. I think two is that yoga is not for everybody. And when I say everybody, I mean every person, but also like every physical body, right? If you're going to a studio and they're not offering you modifications, or there are not classes where you're using props to support your practice, that studio is not for you. And so I think that we have to start thinking about how we are making yoga accessible to all body types, because there's literally a type of practice for everyone.
I love that. Another question from Jamila is, what do you say to those who think practicing yoga is a colonizing activity?
I disagree. I think that it has been co-opted, like so many things, right? I think that in a lot of ways, we see lots of videos and images of skinny white women practicing yoga in like all these random places, and we're like, that's cool, but that's not my experience, right? And I think to acknowledge there's difference within the yoga community is to acknowledge that it doesn't have to be something that is colonizing. I think it's also about who you're learning from. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I love about my yoga teacher is that she brings us back to the original texts, right? We're reading a lot of the texts that have been translated from Sanskrit. We are spending time learning about some of the original yogis before this practice was brought to the West. And so I think it's the same in your research, right? It's like, where is your theoretical framework coming from? Who's informing your study? And so I think if you approach it that way, it doesn't have to be a colonizing practice.
Perfect. How do you start yoga with physical limitations?
I think that it depends on what the physical limitations are. So full transparency, I tore my ACL like in high school, and randomly it'll start bothering me again. Like I had to go to physical therapy, at the end of last year. And so I think that you have to think consciously about what duress you might be putting your body under. One of the things our teacher had started to emphasize with us is that if you're someone, for instance, who struggles with knee issues, every time you do yoga, there should be a mat or a blanket or something under your knees to support it. If you should always make your teacher, if you're not practicing online, you should always make your teacher aware of whatever physical limitations that you have. And then also focus on like what is it that your body can do, right? Yoga is about going to your edge, and not it's not, the goal is not to look like the person next to you. When you practice, you're staying on your mat. And that's the philosophy I take with me, even off of the mat, like I'm staying on my mat. But when you stay on your mat and you push yourself to your edge, then the practice becomes your own.
I think that's the last question that I saw. I guess my only question was, are there any, like, and you might end up be showing us, are there any like quick practices we can do when we're in a moment of stress?
Yeah. So that's actually what we're gonna get into now. So couple things with yoga on the mat. Like I mentioned, always go to your own physical edge. Never be intimidated by what someone is doing next to you. For all of the poses, I'll show you modifications of what's happening. If you have the space or the room right now, go ahead and make yourself comfortable. Get a blanket if you have one, a pillow if you're able. We don't need, pillow or a blanket. So I'll give everyone like 30 seconds to get the things that you need. These are all really low leverage poses, and the breathing exercise too. So what I'm going to do today is I'm not actually going to go through an entire practice like I might if I were teaching a class, but I do want to introduce you all to some poses that could be particularly helpful for you as you enter and go through grad school. The first is not a pose, it's actually a breath exercise, and it's called Durga Pranayama. Durga Pranayama is our 3-part breath. And so find a comfortable seated position, whether that is sitting with your legs crisscross applesauce, or for some folks, it might be lying down on the ground. Some people may choose to have their legs up a wall, but find what's comfortable for you. Bring your shoulders up to your ears if you're sitting up, and then roll them down your back so you're sitting up nice and tall. And then allow your eyes to float closed. Good. With your hands on your lap, I want you to take an inhale in. And as you inhale, feel your belly expand with air like a balloon. And exhale, allowing your belly to fall and deflate. One more time, inhale, filling your belly up with air completely through your nose. And exhaling through your nose, allowing your belly to deflate completely. Good. On this inhale, you're going to fill your belly with air and then allow your chest to expand. Good. Exhale, chest and belly. Excellent. One more time. Inhale, belly and chest. And exhale, chest and belly. And for this last part, you're going to inhale belly and chest, and take one more sip of air up into your lungs, holding for just a second, and exhaling lungs, chest, and belly. Again, inhaling belly, chest, and lungs, holding at the top, and exhaling lungs, chest, and belly. Allow your breathing to return to its normal state. And when you're ready, float your eyes back open. So take a moment before we move into this next pose to take stock of how you're feeling. Do you feel different in your body than you did before we started? Do you feel more calm? Do you feel more aware of your senses and your surroundings? Does the room look brighter? Take note of all of these things. And so this is an example of a yoga practice that you can cultivate even outside of the class. So I'm actually gonna move myself now so that we can do a couple of poses. So we're gonna move through 5 poses, and let me explain. First, we're gonna move through Vrikasana, and you can feel free to repeat after me if you like. So I have the Sanskrit terms and the English terms. So Vrikasana is tree pose. We're gonna do Urdhva Mukha Pasasana, which is thread the needle. Ardha Matsyadrasana, half Lord of the Fishes. Ekapada Rajapakopatasana, Pigeon Pose. And Savasana, which is a favorite of most people. And that is our corpse pose, and that's how we'll close for today. So we're gonna start off with tree pose. So for each pose, I have the benefits listed here, so feel free to take a look at them on your own time. But for tree pose, you're gonna bring your feet hips width distance apart. And there's a way to check this, so if you're not quite sure, you can just separate your feet and find whatever feels comfortable. But if you need a bit more direction, you can bring your 2 fists together and put them on the floor between your feet. And so your feet, they should fit snugly between your feet. And then come back up. And then go ahead and shift your weight into your left leg and bring your hands to your hips. Now, before you do this with me, I want to show you 3 different versions of this pose. So again, like I said, you go to your physical edge. Some days my edge is different than others. We'll see what happens today. So the first variation of this pose is to prop your foot up on your ankle and stay there, perfectly fine. The second is to bring it to your calf. And the third is to bring your foot inside your thigh. Quick note here, you want to avoid putting your foot on your knee. That's an easy way to create a knee injury and to just pop it out of place. So when you're ready, on an inhale, bring your foot to where it's going to go. And you'll want to find a spot in the room that's standing still. It's not moving, and focus on that spot. It's called your drishti, and that's where we focus. Once you find some stillness in this pose, you can bring your hands to prayer. Or you can grow to the full extension of your tree. We'll stay here for 3 breaths. And when you're ready, come out of the pose the way you went in. So bring your hands to your heart, to your hips, lower your foot. And then just shake that leg out. Bringing your hands back to your hips, shifting your weight to your other leg. Finding the same spot on your leg on this opposite side. What we do to one side, we do to the other for balance. Finding your drishti, and then growing your tree. And then coming out of the pose the same way you went in. So tree, one of my yogi friends said to me the other day that if you ever want to know where you are physically, mentally, emotionally, stand up in a tree and see what happens. Tree tells us a lot about how we're balancing, how we are grounding ourselves, and so how we're being present in our bodies and connected with the earth. So tree is always a good one to start off with if you just kind of need to see where you're at. The next pose we're going to do is called thread the needle. So you're going to come down to all fours. And you're gonna come onto your knees, and you want your knees hips width distance apart, so we'll do the same thing here. We bring our hands to touch, put them right between our thighs, see where we're at, and then come back up. The second alignment tip is that when you look through your legs, you should not be able to see your feet. So come onto all fours, look through your legs. If you can see your feet, you may need to move them out or in. You want to then adjust your arms so that your shoulders are over your elbows or over your wrists. And then you are going to move your left hand to the center of your body. Please don't mind my shifting. I'm just trying to make sure you all can see me. Move your left hand to the center of your body. Inhale, bring your right arm up into the sky. Shift your gaze towards that arm. And on an exhale, you are literally going to thread your needle. So your right arm goes under your left, and that right shoulder and ear come down to the mat or the floor. So you have the option of staying here, or you can walk that left hand out, and for a deeper stretch, you can put it in a bind behind your back. And we'll be here for 3 breaths. Good. Ready, right hand pushing up out of that left hand. Inhaling, reversing the spine. And exhale, floating that right hand back down to the mat. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm just going to change direction so you can see me. So this time you're going to inhale up the opposite hand, twisting your spine. Exhale, threading through, bringing your shoulder and your ear to the mat. Another modification for this pose, if you have it, is to bring a pillow under your shoulder and ear. So sometimes our bodies don't want to go, and that's okay. You just bring the floor to you. And when you're ready, pushing up out of your hand, undoing your thread and your needle, reaching towards the sky to give that spine a counter stretch, and exhale, floating our hand back down. Good. The next one is called Half Lord of the Flies. So I'm going to do this from the side first. So you're going to come onto your bum, and you're going to sit in what is called staff pose or Dandasana. So in Dandasana, your feet are flexed, your legs are actively engaged. Sometimes you may need to move some of this extra meat that we got away so that our sits bones can be in contact with the ground. We're sitting up nice and tall on our spine. Roll the shoulders down the back. Your hands are touching the floor. To get into Lord of the Flies, there are a couple ways to do this. The first is to bring both feet to the mat. To thread your left foot under your right knee. Wrap your right foot around, and sometimes you may need to assist by just tugging your feet a little bit. Inhaling that left arm up into the air, and exhaling, twisting. Ooh, and my back cracked. And twisting, hey, and looking to the side where you're twisting. So that's one option. Another option is simply to put your right foot on the ground over your left and twist. And if this feels like a lot of engagement for you, the other option is to sit in crisscross applesauce. Roll your shoulders down your back. Inhale your arms into the air. And exhale, bring your left arm to your right knee, your left hand to your right knee, and looking over your back shoulder. We'll stay here for 3 breaths. Excellent. And inhale, coming out of whatever variation of the pose you chose to take. And taking a big exhale. And when you're ready, choosing the variation of the pose is best for you. So if you did thread the needle, do that again. And if you sat in crisscross applesauce, you can do that again. And when you're ready, inhaling your right arm up and exhaling, sending your gaze to the side. Making sure your back is straight. With each inhale, sitting up just a bit higher. And exhale, twist just a bit more deeply. Feeling that stretch in your spine and in your core. And inhale and exhale, release. So with Lord of the Fishes, we tend to hold, and let me actually back up and talk a little bit about thread the needle. We hold a lot of tension in our upper back and shoulders, and thread the needle, especially as writers, is good for us after we've been sitting at our desks all day or after a long writing session, to kind of get rid of some of that tension that's been up there. Our solar plexus chakra, which is also here, is where, which is where a lot of our decision making and our identity happens. And so when we stretch that and we stir up some of the energy in there, it allows us to be better decision makers. With Lord of the Half Fishes, it stretches out our hips and our neck and our spine and gives us relief from menstrual discomfort, right? So there are some different things these poses are doing. We have two final poses. The first one is Pigeon Pose. This is a bit more of a challenging pose. I'm going to offer a few modifications, but feel free to watch before you decide whether this is something you would like to join us in. So for Pigeon, you're back on all fours, and you'll bring your left knee towards your left wrist. Twist that foot so that it's parallel, your ankle is parallel with the mat. Stretch the leg behind you out, and your hip should come down to the floor. If not, this is where a mat or a pillow comes in, so you can sit it under that hip. On an inhale, you'll sit up nice and tall, and you can stay here, and that's perfectly fine. You can come down on your forearms, or for the full extension of the pose, you can walk your hands out and bring your forehead to the ground. Pigeon is really good for helping us to sit with challenging or discomforting situations. So go ahead and make your way into the pose if you're not already. We'll take 3 breaths here. And when you're ready, removing the prop from under you, rolling onto that left hip, swinging your right leg around, straightening your left leg, and just tapping them both out of it. And this time I'll do it from the side. So coming back onto all fours, bringing your opposite leg up, your opposite knee to your wrist, making that shin parallel with the mat, and stretching that back leg out behind you, using your prop if need be, and determining where you'll rest in the pose. One of the things about Pigeon is that because it's uncomfortable, it sometimes brings us face to face with our emotions. And so sometimes it's good to do this to take in stock with whether the pose is challenging or whether there's an emotion that's coming to the surface that we don't want to deal with. Take one more inhale, one more exhale. Remove your top. Rolling onto that hip. Swinging that back leg to the front. And then tapping out both legs. And our final pose of the night is Corpse Pose. And so when you're ready, make your way down onto your back, allowing your legs to splay open and your arms and hands to do the same. Allow your eyes to float closed. And determine whether you want your hands face down for grounding or face up to receive energy. Notice your breath. Notice the sensation of your breath, how your belly and your chest rise and fall. Thank yourself for loving yourself enough to come to the mat today, to engage in something for you, for a moment to be present and grounded. Allow the floor to fully support your weight. Relying on another source for support. Notice where your body comes into contact with the ground. Notice any spaces where your body might be holding tension, and release it. As you inhale, breathe in all of the things that you need, whether it's love, or joy, or peace. And exhale that which no longer serves you. Fear, anger, guilt. Allow yourself to just be. As we close out, you can either stay here, or when you're ready, you can meet me in a comfortable seat. There is no rush. Acknowledge where you are and what your body needs, and honor that. For those who are seated with me, inhale, bring your arms over your head, sealing love, sealing hope between your hands. And as you exhale, bring them down to heart center. If you would like, you can repeat the closing affirmation after me. I am happy. I am healthy. I am whole. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to practice with you today. And we close with a simple affirmation that means the light in me sees and acknowledges the light in you. Namaste. I will be around for a few more minutes if anyone would like to chat or ask any more questions. I will also leave the slide up that has my information and a link where you can sign up to practice yoga with me further.
I want to come in very softly to this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful session. Dr. Griffin, thank you so much for this. Someone asked if they could work with you online. You all now know she has a link. We all have one more session and then the summit will be over. Come over to my Instagram where you can hear I'm talking with Angela from Academic Muscle, and we're going to be talking about our wellness journeys as graduate students. If you are in front of your computer, please join in and give Dr. Griffin, Dr. Autumn, a thank you, a clap emoji, whatever you feel moved to do. But this was awesome. Thank you so much. And for really ending the Zoom side of the summit, just like in this really amazing way. Autumn, I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. I wouldn't think anything of it. All right, y'all. I'm gonna mute myself just to leave space for you all to ask questions or take this time. But I'll be over on Instagram at 9 o'clock going live.